Okay.
How long do you think, Claire, you need?
That's it. I'm pretty much ready. Just I can share that a bit, and then.
No, I mean time-wise. Like, should we use?
Oh, it's a very good question. I did this in CEI, but I had a lot less time. So yeah, probably not the whole lot. I'd say 20 minutes, half an hour, I'd say would probably be enough, but I can walk through some bits with people if they want to know more. So it just depends.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good. Then I think we should start now, and then if people can join as they come, and then we can share the link with them as soon as we are done. Is that okay?
Yeah, totally.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, everyone, thank you for being here today. Just want to say something. When it comes to creativity in teaching, I'm really proud that our department thrive and shine into doing so many good things to our students. This morning, Ian presented in innovation in terms of teaching, and this afternoon, Claire will be sharing her experience with how to monitor basically students' group work, which is helpful to ensure some sort of equity and fair grading later on and following up on their group work and group projects. She has developed several concepts. One of them is the how-to videos and concepts over the last couple of years. And she's been developing these videos as we go. And today, we'd like to thank you, Claire, for coming in and share your experience with us. And I hope everyone will find it enjoyable as well as useful. Okay, so you can start.
Thanks, Amjad. Thank you. That's a nice introduction. Can everyone hear me okay? That's the first question. Great, good. So yeah, basically, I've got a couple of things then perhaps I can go through. I had originally thought, yeah, I've got two things. One is the Chrome extensions that I normally use to, I wrote the word monitor on there, but I don't particularly like that word. It's monitoring, ensuring equity, helping students along the way to make sure that they're actually doing the work, and I can give them feedback along the way. I'm sure a lot of you already use Google Docs already, or perhaps some form of the Google Suite. So I just wanted to show you a bit about what I do, because I do a lot of group work. I've been doing group work for years now, but this has really helped dealing with group issues, but also I think helping groups to do better in a more sequential kind of way. So I think it's going to be quite practical, but really what I'm trying to do is to, and what I've been working on slowly over time is just to try to get through and get rid of that black hole that is the group assignment, ultimately, where you don't know what's happening. You send them all off. Who's doing what work? Is anyone actually working? And it got really, particularly now that we've sort of moved online, I felt like that was a really big issue I needed to tackle. So I actually presented this back in CEI. So if you actually attended that, you may have already seen this before, but if not, no problem. So ultimately what I looked for as a solution, I mean, I've been using Google Docs even before we moved to online learning, but I found a few extensions that I could use that actually helped me to gather the information a little bit more. So perhaps some of you know of the version history that you can look at in a Google Doc. I'll just stop sharing this and share with you what I'm talking about. So I use Chrome, and in particular, what I'm going to talk about today is Chrome extensions, not Google Docs extensions itself or add-ons, but actually Chrome extensions. So you do need to use Chrome as a browser to get these. But ultimately, when you're looking at a group document, I mean, what I used to use quite a lot, it's not going to delete, is I would go to the version history, right? So I would go down to version history, see the version history, and ultimately see which students are doing what when. The problem with this is you sort of have to go into each particular version, have a look down, see who's done what, and it's really quite time consuming. But obviously, if there was an issue, I used to use that. So what I actually found was a couple of different Google Chrome extensions that actually add to that, and they actually gather some of that data all into one aggregate, and they're sort of different ways. So I'll share with you again my slides to show you what I'm talking about. So there's three extensions I want to talk about. I want to talk about AuthorViz, DocViz, and DraftBack. If you haven't used those before, I think actually Tim originally introduced me to DraftBack, so that's what I've been using for the longest. But ultimately, what each of these do are different things. So with AuthorViz, essentially what you're looking at there is it will process the document, and then the finalized product, it will actually go through and highlight the different students and which parts they've actually done. So I've got a screenshot there of one of the ISC plans that I actually used at some point. So basically it color codes the authors, so you know who's contributed what to the final version of the document. So that's really useful for just looking at, you know, who did what in the end result. One of the issues with that, though, is that obviously if somebody has copied someone's work and repasted it back in as theirs, it can be a little bit misleading. And I have actually had one student that I had some issues with that did that at one point. So generally, I like to use these three things in conjunction with each other. So what you can see up the top there is obviously I've sort of given them a template, and then each of the students has actually gone in there and I've got their Google Gmail account and I've added them to the document to get this information. So one of the important things when you're using Chrome extensions like this is that you don't use the anonymous tabs. So I know when we often share group documents, when we're putting in sort of details and stuff for our work, that it's often just sharing a link. So you need to actually go further than that, because it won't record which student is who. So if you've already set up your Google Docs as just a link to students, you'll need to actually go back and actually make sure that each student has their own Gmail account actually attached to it, so you know who's doing what. Otherwise, it will all come up anonymous and you won't see anything at all. So that's just one tip there. So that's AuthorViz. There's also another Chrome extension called DocuViz. And what this does is gives you a look at what's happened across the document, across time. So it gives you a few different types of things. It gives you a table, which you can see up here, and it talks about sort of what kind of editing has been done, the final contribution, the total editing that was done, have they edited other people's work, and what have they edited or contributed themselves as well. So when I look at something like this, I can clearly see that Daoud has not contributed a lot in the final document, but also perhaps not so much themselves during the time as well. I can see that Rashid has done quite a lot there in the total in editing themselves, but they haven't actually edited much. Well, actually, no, they've edited probably a lot. So overall, I can see he's done the best there. But that's kind of useful to know, what have they actually contributed themselves? What are they just sort of editing of other people's, and what's the total edit they had at the end, as well as the contribution to the final document. I'll show you in a minute what these little question marks here, because that's really useful for understanding what each of these actually means. But ultimately, DocuViz checks the weight of the final contribution, shows reviewing of students' revisions, and the time frame of the contributions as well, which I'll show you in a minute on a document that I had to use last semester with a group issue. It can be really, really helpful when trying to figure out what's happening within a group. So that's called DocuViz. Oh, and here's an example of, I know it looks a little bit strange right now, but this is the report that comes out, not just the table in DocuViz, but also the time frame as well. So what you can see is different people there. I can see that Rashid has clearly done a lot of that work there. I've got the template at the beginning, which has stayed there the whole time, but I can see that at certain times, whoever green is, Ibrahim has come in at September and been doing work from there, and then added a bit more over time towards October, etc. Whereas I can see that perhaps the purple line really was just at that beginning part and didn't do much in that latter half of the document. And you can actually go in and really click on these and look back at what's happened in the past at a particular date as well, what the contributions were at that particular date as well, if you just click on each of these. I'll show you in a minute specifically how it works. Then lastly, the other Chrome extension that I use is Draftback. So this is really the first one that I started using, and it actually lets you replay what's happening, typing either in slow or fast motion of what's happened within the Google document. So I use that for things like detecting copying, pasting activities, if there's any disputes in group activities, if someone's deleted something or overwritten someone's stuff, in terms of contributions, which something like AuthorViz doesn't really show you, because it's just showing you what the end result is. Now, this probably sounds a lot like I'm monitoring absolutely everything all the time. I don't necessarily do that. I do generally try to go in before the end of semester, at least a couple of times, just to have a quick look. It doesn't take much to pull up these reports, just to see if there's someone that's not doing much at all, what's sort of happening in there. And if I'm having a group meeting, I'll talk to them about it if somebody's really not pulling their weight. Or, which I'm sure a lot of us have come across before, if you've done group work, if there's a group issue, it's really, really useful in determining more objectively what's actually happening within it as well. So this one is really specific in that it actually is showing sort of the typing, which I'll show you in a minute as well. A couple of things before I go into showing you them, some tips that you need to think about if you're going to set this up. So I've just done my intro to marketing, all 3 classes, and I did my IMC class already a couple of weeks ago to set up their group documents. One thing that I did a mistake one year was I actually made it into Google Sheets, but these extensions don't work on slides or sheets. Sorry, it was slides or sheets. So instead of using slides is the PowerPoint version of Google, and Sheets is the Excel version, you need to be doing it in a Google Doc to be able to see it. I'm not sure if there've been any updates, but that was the case as of 6 months ago. So if you're going to set up the assignment, you want to do it in a Google Doc. When you're sharing the document, you've got to add their Google account email. So what I've done to do that, to make it an easier process for me, I mean, I generally have to get them to set up groups and things like that on Blackboard anyway. And I used to just get them to put their Gmail account in the description of the group, but actually an easier way and easier for you would just be to set up a quick Google form where you have the Gmail, the group, the student ID and the name, and then you can sort by group and just grab that group and the Gmails related to that and just add them to the document. So it does take a little bit of time in setting up, but I find that the beauty of dealing with the group issues and all that kind of stuff really outweighs that time commitment. It probably takes me about a couple of hours to get through, say four classes, just setting them all up on their documents, and if you've got a template and stuff like that as well. So yeah, there's some things just to take note of. Don't just send it as an anonymous link. Restrict the link and tell them to request access from their Google account. That's one way to do it. But I find it easier just to get their IDs through a Google form. Yeah, what else is there? What I do to make sure that everyone's got access. So I told my students this today because I sent out my intro yesterday afternoon. When they get into the document, I always get them to individually write their own name and student ID, so I know who it is that's actually writing what. You can see it by the Google account, but sometimes their Gmail is not their name. So I generally get them to make sure they write their own name in the document. I know this is really specific, but these things I've learned over time, if you don't do, you can kind of get caught up a little bit. Another couple of tips: choose the checkbox that limits the editors from sharing and adding others to documents. I find that really good in case they want to share it with someone outside that's doing work for them or something like that. And I would really suggest, like, I don't use it as a punitive thing all the time. Most of the time I'm using it to say, hey guys, I've looked at this. I can see that there's an imbalance here. I don't want you at the end, when we look at equality of contribution, to be penalized for this. Just make sure that you're contributing, and it really motivates them to start contributing. So that's kind of how I use it. And I do that at the beginning, when they've sort of done their first little part there, so they get motivated and they know that I'm watching, and that I can see what's actually happening as well. And some students really appreciate it, actually, because it means that they're not getting that social loafing kind of going on with their group members and stuff like that. So yeah, that's the extension tips. I'll send these out to you, the slides, but you can get them through basically the Chrome web store. They're all free extensions, but you can click on that link and it will take you to that. You can actually download that onto your Chrome, and I'll show you how to get into it. But yeah, essentially it's the store here. You can just click on extensions there and search for DocuViz, AuthorViz, or DraftBack, and you should be able to get those there. Are there any questions along the way? I've been talking for quite a while now, but I'm just conscious people might have some questions. No. All right. Well, I'll show you what it is that I end up looking at and what you actually see. Where am I? Google Chrome. So yeah, you can see here, I mean, that's the usual version history. So I'll show you how each of them work here. Right, so you can see at the top here. So once you download those from the Chrome store, you'll have these buttons towards the top. Let me just have a look here. So you see AuthorViz, DocuViz, and DraftBack. And so once you click on that, I'll show you the DraftBack first. It will essentially render that. Now, I've previously done that because sometimes it takes a little while to do it, like a few minutes. And then you can play from that actually what's happened inside the Google Doc. So that's useful if you want to see if there's been big chunks of information that's just been copy pasted in directly. You can move to certain time periods. You can make it faster or slower, depending on how quickly you want to get through and sort of see things happening. But that's really good for if you've got, you know, somebody deleted my thing, or, you know, if somebody's copy pasted something, you can actually see that that's happened. What else I look at here is the documents, graphs, and statistics as well. So what I can see here is the document changes that have been done. I can see when they're doing the work, when they're not doing the work, that kind of thing. I can see who's done what when. This also helps you to see when there's been big amounts of work done at certain times as well. So that's kind of useful as well for that. Let me just go back to here. If I look at the AuthorViz, this is the one that shows you just the final document. So this is how long it takes to process it. It's not too long.
I think it's really important to show this example to students once you set up the Google Doc, so they know what they will be facing later on if anything goes wrong.
Yes, yes. I talk about it. I do. Yeah, in class. I let them know that I'll be looking at their contributions through these things. One of the issues that I've had, I mean, it's good because if they actually look at it themselves, they know, oh, okay, I've got to do some more work. I've got to, you know, and it just stops that abyss of what's happening, and they think that, oh, you don't really know what's going on. And I really don't like to use it punitively. I don't, but it really does help with motivation, and just especially with the online stuff. But anyway, yeah, so I do show them sometimes, and when I talk to them and I have a group meeting, I'll say, hey, I can see that you haven't done much here, Mohammed, you know, can you add something to that, if they're at the group meetings. But so what I can see here, this was a case where really I looked at this whole thing and I was like, well, where's my, purple guy, and he's written one sentence here, and there really wasn't much until we sort of got to the end there, a little bit there. So that just tells me of the final product, how much did they add to that? But I actually, in particular, I think this one, DocuViz, is useful for knowing what's happening when, because even though that purple student did provide some stuff in the end, it was useful to see when that happened. And this was after a complaint that a student had given me. I also use some of this stuff for, like if there's a big discrepancy in contribution, I can actually get amount of the contribution as well. So if you're looking at weighting the grades or anything like that, you can also do that using these as well. So this is what it looks like when you have these revisions. Sorry, I'm just getting rid of some of that. There's too much stuff in the way. You'll have the table down here and what's happened when across here. And so what I noticed was really that this student who'd said, I've been working for the whole time, etc., they didn't really start until, I think the due date was the 9th of December, and they didn't really start contributing until 2 days before the due date. At this point, I hadn't really caught that. I don't think he'd been at any of the group meetings and stuff like that. So I managed to speak to him at that point. He sort of added some extra things in there, but I had a look back at DocuViz and found that actually he had copied a whole bunch of the students' work and actually pasted it back in, and that's how he got that extra bit there. So I think using them all at the same time is kind of important, just to make sure that you're not just looking at the aggregate and saying, oh, they've done this amount. So this here tells you how many characters that were inserted, deleted. This one's how many characters were inserted, deleted within the content contributed by others. So if there's other stuff, they're just editing. The total characters in edit, so that's across time, and then the final draft, what's the contribution there. So from this, I mean, you if you just looked at the final contribution, you'd think, oh, everybody's done a relatively even amount there. But if you looked back at it and saw when was it happening, and this was the complaint of one of the students, he's only just started working, it's not really his work and all that kind of stuff, I could actually look back and see, well, yeah, what's really happening in the document there. So that was useful for that. So that's why it's important not just to look at that author viz or the final contribution document there. Yeah, so I think that's all I really needed to show there. I think the other thing was that you can go through the revisions here and see, say, if I wanted to look at before the 8th, what's the final contribution, it comes up here. So it actually changes, and I can see that, oh, yep, he hasn't, before the 8th, he's, given only a small amount here. So you can actually use that to look at a particular date, what the contribution amount was as well. Just a couple of things like that. So yeah, I think that's all I really wanted to go through. I don't know if it's useful for you all, but that's what I've learned over the last 2 years that we've been in COVID, and how to help manage some of those group issues. Yeah.
Actually, this is really interesting.
Yeah. Bit of data analysis, it's pretty easy to do in the end.
So Claire, how do you go about evaluating this specific student's individual contribution at the end? Clearly he put the work the last couple of days somehow.
Yeah.
So what do you do next? If you want to weight his contribution, for example.
Yeah, look, I mean, that was an instance where really I hadn't been able to contact that person for the whole time. Normally I would do a group meeting well before that, after the first couple of weeks, when maybe they've had to do an environmental analysis, or they've had to do, the first little bit of it. And I would actually sit down with the group. I'd have a quick look at all of them and just see, is there a real imbalance here? And I'd just say to the groups where there's a big distinction, hey, let's have a meeting. I'm going to go through this. I normally sort of do group meetings and stuff like that in class anyway, a lot of the time when we do group work. So I would probably just pick it up at that point. In that case, it was a particular case where hadn't been able to contact the student for a while. So it's an unusual one, but I just put that case there to show you that it helps with those disputes where a group member had particularly, I did try to work it out with him at that end stage, but there wasn't much I could do by that point, which is why I'm saying you definitely need to look at it at an earlier stage. And I've found that really, really works. Once you show them, you know, you're not trying to surprise them.
So you take it as a corrective tool along the semester during before they do the final submission.
Yeah, I do that anyway. So the way I set up my group assignments, I generally have milestones. Sometimes I even have it as a part of a grade, like for my campaigns class. Absolutely. I do like individual contributions, and they need to actually show me their individual work on, say, a piece of content or something like that. So that I know that they're all following along across the semester. And you can see it really clearly. It helps even with individual documents. So I also have some individual documents where I need to know, well, when did they put it in at the time? You know, was it late? What's happened there? And that's helped to clear a few things up as well. And they get to know that that's what you do and that's how you deal with stuff. And that I think they appreciate it a lot of the time because they're like, oh, you're actually helping me along the way. You're not just giving me an assignment and expecting me to hand something up at the end without any feedback. So the kinds of stuff that I can come in and do, you know, we can have chats in here. You can see I've talked to the students along the way. Nothing's done here. You know, I give comments along the way as well, so that they know that I'm looking in and trying to help them along the way. So you can sort of see, over time what's happening. Great research, you know, provide the references. It takes a bit more work, but I find that the end result is like a mastery of skills, a bit more than just, here you go, here's what to do. And give me something at the end. Some students will still do the usual, not doing much work and stuff, but I find there's less students using this. Any other questions? It's quite technical, some of the stuff I know, so I'll give you the documents so you've got those tips in there.
That would be great. Thank you, Claire. Right.
Did you want me to look at the how-to videos and stuff, or that's okay, another time?
No, we'll do it another time. I mean, we are creative in our department, so we'd like to share with others, probably next month. See.
Sure.
All right. Thank you, Claire, for stopping by. It's been really insightful, helpful to me, very helpful. And for everyone, we'll share with all of you the link as well as the documents as soon as they are ready.
Yeah, sure. And if you need help, I mean, if you don't know how to do some part of it, I'm really happy to just show you what to do. But you just need to basically go to that Google Chrome extension store, the web store, the Chrome web store. Just look that up on Google.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you.
No worries.
All right.
Enjoy your lunch.
All right. Thanks. Bye, everyone.
All right.